Manny, thank you all of Hercules Dem Club. I see so many of my friends. Congressman Thompson, great to see you. We haven't seen each other in a long time, even though we're in a little box. Rusty, thank you also for your incredible work statewide to make sure that our Dems, that they know where to vote, how to vote, and that the candidates who are supported by the party have the appropriate resources to make sure that we succeed. And elsewhere. This is going, 4 years ago, I got elected to the state Senate, and I had a lovely victory party. Not that I could have guaranteed that I would win, but we were very hopeful. So we were having a lovely party on election night. And it turned out to be both one of the best and worst nights of my life, because obviously I won, but so did the guy who's sitting in the White House now. And we've had a very, well, I don't even want to start. It's beyond the pale in terms of the destruction to our democracy, the destruction to our reputation worldwide, and the harm to Americans, the incredible harm, just the number of deaths due to the pandemic and the unemployment that we're experiencing. I used to work internationally, and I have good friends all around the world, and I talk regularly to a friend of mine who's in Germany and another friend who's in Japan. They have not had the type of economic chaos that we've had. They do not have the level of layoffs and unemployment, nor the number of deaths or the number of infections. And yet we're hit with the pandemic just like us. So I think that just tells us that good, decent leadership can help us all deal. We can't make the virus go away, but decent, good, focused federal leadership will make a huge difference. And I know all of you know that, and I know you're all doing the best you can. I've been doing phone banks, not only for Dems here in California. Obviously, I have colleagues we want to make sure get reelected, senators and assembly members, but also I've been doing phone banks for Christy Smith, who is running for Congress. And it's the estimate is she's the most competitive seat right now for a Dem in Congress. Maybe Congressman Thompson can tell us if that's inaccurate or not. But I've been doing phone banks for her, and then obviously phone banks for Biden and for Democratic senators who are running in the swing states. And there's still time, even though across the country there's early voting. And good news is way more people have voted as a percentage than usually at this time. There are still a lot of people who haven't voted. There are still a lot of people who either have a ballot or haven't gone to their early voting station or who are waiting till election day. So we can still make a difference. So calling and such definitely makes a difference. Now, I'm happy to talk about various of the propositions that are on the ballot that are in California, because I know some people, there's 12 of them. Some people have been confused, and I could go through a few of them, or I could just take some questions, Manny, however you like. But I really appreciate all of your support, and I've found it, I love being the state senator for Senate District 9. It's an amazing district. I have the best constituents and allows me to be bold and do very strong bills on whether it's on justice reform or climate protection or any number of other things. So thank you. And Manny, if you'd like me to talk about any of the propositions, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we'd like, if you can talk about what, I know it's been a short legislative session that you had, and with COVID, it affected your bills and
yes,
all that activity. But what bills did you introduce this year, and and also what new legislation is there?
Right.
Plus also your proposed legislation for the next session, maybe.
I had some great bills this year because of COVID, both the economic downturn and meeting less and such. I dropped down to just 5, and then unfortunately, you know, members of the legislature are human also, And I would say that that last week of session was not our best selves. We did not respond to the voters or to the residents of California in the way that I would hope that a legislature would. And as a result, things ran out the clock. We had Republicans who were in effect filibustering in the state Senate and prevented us on the last night of session from taking some bills up. So I had two bills right there sitting in the Senate that didn't get to be taken up because of the filibuster of the Republicans. And then I had a bill in the Assembly that they took too long to pass. So there was a lot of not great behavior, just partly the confusion of the pandemic and other reasons. And so a lot of bills got hung up. But I did get a very important bill passed and signed into law. And that is a bill where, unfortunately, because of the economic downturn, we have people who are unable to pay their mortgage right now. And we do not want to see a foreclosure crisis like we saw in the last recession. So far, both there's state and federal actions that are preventing foreclosures for the moment. We don't know how long we can hold banks from basically from preventing a foreclosure if people are not able to pay their mortgage, but we are doing our best. We want to try to stave that off. But in the meantime, if we do face foreclosures, what we want to make sure is that big corporations like the company, I believe it was Blackstone, that during the last recession, a foreclosed home is always sold for cash in an auction. And what they would do is go into a foreclosure auction with big bucks and buy up all the homes at once, put a bid on 100 homes at once. And so these corporations, what happened in the last recession is there was a huge shift, and owner-occupied home ownership dropped in California more than it had dropped in 3 decades, in 30 years, just because these corporate entities were buying up foreclosed homes. So my bill that the governor signed into law prevents a corporation from being able to buy up more than a single home at an auction. They can't multiple buy. It also does is in the foreclosure auction, you can put a bid in, and then 10 days after bids are accepted, they can reopen the bidding process to the tenant occupant or the homeowner occupant or to nonprofit housing developers. And if they can meet the bid, the highest bid that was made in the initial auction, they can buy the house. So that way, the tenant who lives there or the person whose home is foreclosed may have the shot at being able to retain the home. So that, my bill was keep Californians housed, and it was signed into law. Now, another very important bill that I had, which fortunately did not get passed, but it wasn't because there was opposition, it was just because of what happened on that day, was my very important police records bill, which was a expansion of the police records bill I did in 2018, which was SB 1421, where my bill, for the first time, busted open California's 40 years of secrecy. California has had 40 years where no one could have access to any records on police misconduct. So in 2018, I got 1421 passed, and it opened 3 categories of records. But as we see with what's happened since, and the unfortunately, the amount of, well, I would say it's a small percent of law enforcement officers, but the bad behavior by some percent of those officers, we need more public access to more categories of records. So I had a bill that would do that. It had support, and but it just didn't succeed that day. So I am reintroducing it on the very first day of the session. So I will be doing my police records bill. I will also do some other housing bills, and I'm likely to, well, not likely, I will be doing a bill to reverse a number of years ago, California made it a crime if you were a truant meaning a student who, and the parents could be arrested. And what we're finding now, we just had a situation where, I think it was in Lafayette, where a student did not attend a 3-hour Zoom class, and law enforcement sent him a letter that because of their not attending the Zoom class, they were a truant and could be subject to arrest. Well, that is not appropriate. If kids aren't in school, we have to get at the bottom of it, not criminalize it, either them or their parents. So I will be introducing a bill to reverse that. And I'll also be doing something in the, either in probably the climate protection, but the ability to manage our soils better so that our soils can be the carbon sequester, can be the carbon storage that they have the capacity to be. So those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about right now for the next legislative session.
Senator Skinner, what about your new bill about those college athletes?
Ah, that was, now that one, that I passed in 2019, and I'm very, very proud of that. In fact, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the basketball legend, sent me a birthday message thanking me for that work. And what it did was give ownership to the student athlete of their name, image, and likeness. So all of us have that. We have that. So if somebody else made a t-shirt with my face on it and started selling it, and I didn't give them permission, that's against the law because I own my image. But if you're a student athlete, you sign away your rights. But now in California, you won't sign your rights away anymore. And as a result of California's law, which is the first in the country, now 30 states are acting. And the national NC2A, the College Athletic Association, is looking at revising their laws, revising their rules across the country. So we potentially, my bill potentially could be a catalyst for change across the country. But what I have to do this year is we didn't anticipate that we would get such incredible support across the country. So we made it where my bill did not go into effect for a whole nother year. And now these other states have acted and their bills will go into effect before Californians. So we don't want the California athletes to be at a disadvantage. So I'm going to be fixing the date in legislation this year.
Thank you. I'm sure that a lot of people here have questions. Dion, do you want to?
Susan Keefe has a question in the chat.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Susan Keefe has a question.
Okay, Susan.
So I see it in the chat.
That's right. I put it in the chat. I didn't want to interrupt.
Certainly. So Susan, I am strongly in favor of Prop 15. And I recommend that everyone vote yes, and that you encourage your friends, neighbors, and relatives. And as usual in political season, the ads against Prop 15 are quite misleading. They're really wrong. But Prop 15, especially now in this economic downturn, we don't want a situation where we are cutting funds to our schools. Prop 15 is the guarantee that our schools will have decent funding. I can't guarantee that it'll be the best funding in the world, but it will be decent because what Prop 15 does is correct what's called the split roll. And just simply, and I'm sure you all have heard this many times, the property tax measure that was passed 40 years ago in California, Prop 13, and sold as something that was good for homeowners, what it really was a corporate giveaway. So you have Chevron Refinery, other refineries all across Contra Costa County that are assessed at 40-year-old levels. They are not paying near the property taxes that their property is valued at. And as a result, our schools, our public libraries, so many other services are underfunded. The way to correct it is Prop 15.
I've been concerned about the TV ads with the NAACP
Oh, yes.
and that confused me because I was with you and then I saw those ads and I thought, what's this about?
No. So that's what's so terrible. The NAACP did not vote on that measure. That is purely the chair of the NAACP statewide. Her name is Alice Hoffman. She basically is being paid, and you can go up on the Secretary of State website and see they've actually paid her. They have paid her to take that position and express that. So it wasn't a vote by the NAACP in California. So it's really terrible.
Yeah, those are very misleading ads to our minorities, and I was concerned when I saw those.
Yes. Now, Prop 22, I'm getting all my I was going to go through the whole list. I'm getting all my props. Well, first, remind me, Prop 19 is, Susan, Prop 19 is?
Oh, I think that's the one
The property tax.
for the firefighters.
Oh, yes. Okay. Now, that one, this is one of those where I sent out a little blast on it, and I was pretty much you have to make up your own mind. But here's what it does. Again, Prop 13, 40 years ago, what it did was allowed for a homeowner, once they got over a certain age, that if they wanted to sell their house but retain their low property taxes because they were retired seniors and they wanted to keep those low property taxes, they could buy. The rule was you could buy a house in your own county. So that's right now. You can only buy a house in your own county, and it has to be at a price lower than the house you live in. And then you could retain your taxes. Well, the result of that, as we've seen prices go up all around us, is that a lot of retired people, seniors, are not selling their homes. They're sitting in way bigger property, way bigger square footage than they necessarily want or need. But they feel like they can't afford to leave because they could not afford to have the property taxes that you would have to pay if you moved to another county or you bought a home that costs more. So what this bill does is correct that. And it allows the senior to be able to move to another county, anywhere in California, and buy a house that's more expensive. Now, if you buy the house that's more expensive, you don't get to retain your exact property tax. It will be adjusted, but you still get lower than let's say you bought a $900,000 house. You would not be assessed at $900,000. You'd be assessed at a small percent different from what the home you lived in. Now, the other thing that it does is under Prop 13, it allowed a person, so let's say I wrote my will and I gave my daughter my house, and it allowed her to be able to inherit it and to keep the exact same property tax, even if she didn't live in it. So if you think about it right now, you have to live in your home to keep that property tax. If otherwise, that's called the homeowner exemption. Otherwise, your property tax would be higher. But under this weird Prop 13 thing, the kid could inherit and pay the low taxes, even if they were just renting it out or using it as a vacation home or something. So it fixes that. It still allows for the inheritance. And if the child or if the inheritor stays and lives in the home, they get the low property tax, but not if they don't live in the home. Okay. So it may have an overall plus property tax benefit. In other words, because more people might sell their homes, but it might also have a little lower. But if there's any increase, then that money goes to our firefighting services, which when you consider the fire risk in California, that's pretty legitimate. So it's one of those where if you feel that certain aspects of the parts of Prop 13 are not good, no matter what you do, then you might say no. But if you feel like that correction of being able to allow seniors to move into other counties and to fix that inheritance thing, you'd be yes.
Good, thank you.
I have a follow-up question for that. When it comes to determining whether someone, like whether one of the next generation that inherited a property, how is it determined whether or not they live there? Like, how easy is it for someone to cheat that system?
Uh-huh.
How would that be determined?
Right. I mean, yes, you could, there's always the ability, I think, to cheat in a weird way. However, the only way you wouldn't retain that lower property tax is if you owned another property in California and you were living there. So the thing about where you'd be limited in your cheat is that if you clicked the homeowner exemption on both properties that you owned, they'd know you were cheating, right? So it's like I said, probably somebody can figure out a way to cheat, but there's enough safeguards that it would be limited.
Thank you.
Dion, did you have a
Now,
question?
lastly, Prop
Yeah.
20
Sorry.
Prop 22, let's quickly do Prop 22 though. If you watch TV, Gloria Allred's ads are the best. Gloria Allred tells it like it is. If you are an Uber or Lyft driver, you do not get any type of benefits. You cannot take a sick day. You do not have paid family leave. You don't have unemployment insurance. You don't have workers' comp. You get injured, you're on your own. And so certain people want to be independent contractors. Makes sense. And they set up a business for themselves and they buy insurance and such. They set up things so that they can manage if they got sick or but there's no guarantee what your income is going to be if you're an Uber and Lyft driver. You do not really control as much. You're not really running a business. They're dispatching you. So it's Uber and Lyft, to me, they are so disingenuous, and they are running this bill or this proposition because the California courts ruled that, in fact, their drivers were employees. Under the test of what an employee is, the court said, Uber and Lyft, your people are employees. They can't just go and pick up anybody they want and drive anytime they want. They are being dispatched by you. They are employees. And so then the legislature put into law what the court ruled. And Uber and Lyft don't want to play by the rules. So they put this initiative on the ballot. It's a bad initiative. And additionally, if you are a person that uses Uber and Lyft and you're sexually harassed, for example, you have no protections under the law because that Uber or Lyft driver is this independent contractor. So I am absolutely no on Prop 22.
Thank you so much.
Now, there was another question.
Dion wants to ask you a question.
I just want to say good evening, Senator Skinner, and thanks for, I'm a council member here in town
Idea.
in my first term. Good to see you again. I think I last saw you
Yeah.
about a year ago at an event that was open back in the day, back when we could get out and do things. I want to thank you for taking the time to come over to our town and then your help with the legislation. I know that you mentioned the foreclosure issue. I think that's important. I think Hercules suffered a little bit during the last recession because of that. So I think we all, as those of us that own homes or that live in a home that's owned by somebody, appreciate that kind of protection. I know that you did it's kind of technical, but you also did some work for us with some legislation, specifically Hercules. And I just want to thank you for that work as well. I know it was a heavy lift, and we appreciate what you and our state assemblywoman, Buffy Wicks, did for us. So thank you very much for that.
Well, you're welcome. And Sherry McCoy is on the call. You know, she's my great constituent services coordinator and worked very closely with City of Hercules on that. We weren't as successful as we hoped, but hey, we're all in.
And we appreciate that. And Manny, that's all I have. I may have a question later, but I'll let everyone else talk. Thank you again, Senator Skinner.
Okay. I think Chuck Carpenter wants to ask you a question.
Hey, Chuck.
I don't know if I wanted to ask you a question, but thank you for being here. I too haven't seen you in forever.
I know.
I have a question, actually, the foreclosure bill.
Yeah.
During the depression that they call a recession,
Right.
companies were buying 250 houses at a grab in Antioch.
Right.
Will this bill still allow them to buy 250 houses, but one at a time?
They cannot, well, it could, but they'd have to pay a high price. And the main reason they were able to, so, you know, the corporations, because they could bid on 250 at once and pay cash, who else had the cash for 250 houses? So they always would pay very little per house, but a big dollar amount because they were getting 250 houses. Now they're going to have to bid
Right.
a single house, and if they underbid, then we can outbid them. So, and they're not going to want to pay anything near market. Their game is not, it's just to buy it up like in a fire sale. And we've pretty much eliminated them from being able to buy it up at a cheap rate at a fire sale.
In Antioch, they bought them up and rented them out.
Oh, I know. And they have, there's a whole new Wall Street asset class called single family home rentals now. And these corporations, I mean, there's a lot in Richmond. There's a lot in Oakland. My daughter actually lives in Richmond and rents from one of these corporate entities. And it's outrageous what they do. Things that normally you expect the owner of the property to take care of are in your lease as your responsibility. You know, things that break, appliances, everything, they're all on you, the tenant, instead of the owner. It's outrageous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that. It doesn't sound like they're going to scoop them up one at a time.
It'll be harder.
Good.
Selena, did you have a question?
Actually, I do. I'm
Hi, Selena.
23. Hi. Good to see you. I love that you always show up for us. That's
Sure.
fantastic. I'm 23. I have some friends that are actually nephrologists or not nephrologists, but they work in, they're kidney doctors.
Yeah,
And I have friends who've had transplants, so I know sort of both sides. And
on the dialysis measure.
yeah, so I'm confused because the dialysis doctors tell me that this is a really terrible bill and that most of what's in it's already in prior bills. And requirement for a physician, it's like a physician's going to be sitting around twiddling their thumbs and it's not actually going to improve the care. Now, if there's a problem with a patient, they go to the emergency room. So it's such a, it doesn't seem like from their perspective that this is a good bill.
Well, we have two companies. God, I forget their name.
Oh, Frenesis or something like that?
Yeah, and one other. What's the other one called?
Davita.
Davita.
DaVita, right. All right. So they're basically two companies that have a monopoly on almost every dialysis clinic in the entire state of California. And, you know, they claim that they are fair, that they're doing everything right. They do. Unfortunately, there are a lot of complaints against them filed to California's health regulator. Now, the union, SEIU, UHW, which are healthcare workers, has been trying to organize the workers at the dialysis clinics. And those two companies have used many very severe anti-union tactics to prevent the workers from being able to get their collective bargaining rights. So this is kind of what I call a holy war between SEIU, UHW, and these two dialysis companies. And this is the second time that there's an initiative. Now, this initiative, unlike the past one or this proposition, will not necessarily help SEIU, UHW get collective bargaining rights for the employees. So it is kind of unusual, but it does increase the safety measures for patients at the clinic. And it does require more inspections, say, by the state for the clinics. So at one level, the argument is that these things will increase the costs to the companies. And because of that, we should not support it because if the costs go up, given that dialysis is a thing that's a life requirement for you. However, these companies certainly are not hurting financially. And one can definitely observe that just by the amount they have spent. Up to this point, before Prop 22, before the amount of money that Uber and Lyft were spending, those two companies broke all records in the last election cycle and in this one in terms of how much they were willing to spend to defeat SEIU UHW's initiative. Now it pales in comparison to what Uber and Lyft are spending, but still they are spending obscene amounts of money. And I think that there's arguments on both sides. I'm voting yes because I do not respect those companies, but there are arguments on both sides in terms of the measure. Legitimate.
Thank you. Colin, did you have anything to say?
Anthony, I'm sorry, Anthony Tave raised his hand.
Oh, okay, Anthony Tave.
Hi, everyone. Again, Nancy, thank you for coming out. I know I'm a council member in the city of Pinole, but Manny and Myrna were gracious enough to invite me to the meeting.
Hey, we welcome all Democrats.
Right. I want to say, and this is more towards the green technology. I'm sure you're aware that Marathon and Phillips 66 are transitioning over to renewable fuels.
Yes.
And then the governor just announced the 2035 goal of electric vehicles. We see this transition happening, and obviously this is a lot of jobs. This is a lot of jobs that are for people that are in both of Hercules and Pinole and across Contra Costa. How is that transition looking, or what is your office the involvement, and what is that? I mean, this is kind of new ground, new territory for some of us. How do you see that happening and transitioning over?
Well, I was impressed that those two refineries on their own decided to make that shift to a different fuel source. And they're doing it, they're not doing it overnight. It's going to take some time. But as a result, I think hopefully there will be no job loss there. Now, if we take some of our other refineries, which are still fully petroleum based, so Chevron, let's use that as an example, if you notice Governor Newsom's, his executive order, it's all new vehicles sold. It doesn't eliminate all the vehicles that are already on the roads. So there's going to be a role for petroleum for some time. And we still need refineries in California because of our own standards for what the mix is in terms of our air quality. Now, what I'm hoping is that Chevron, like the others, will on their own begin to transition so that, because it makes sense, we're going to need fuel sources for lots of different purposes. And there are ways to get renewable fuels, whether it's renewable hydrogen, green hydrogen, or any variety of things. So, one would hope that they on their own would begin that transition so that we still have the robust job base that we have, right? And so I think that is what those of us who are trying to design policy that sends the right market signals so that we retain jobs and we retain an industry, but we switch from carbon.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Sure.
Colin?
Hi, Manny. Thank you for inviting me again. It's good to see you, Senator.
Hi, Colin.
Senator, oh, and Mila. Hi, Mila. Mila says hi. Just, Manny, of interest, just because I saw a press release tonight from the Park District, the senator probably didn't have this much stuff going on when you were on the park board. Did you? I mean,
We have a lot of stuff going on. I mean, the Bay Trail near my house through Golden Gate Fields is, fixed. I think you're going to open the Brickyard sometime soon. And you just did the John Sutter,
right next to the Bay Bridge, right?
Right, which I was really sad to miss. But is the Park District now? Are you going to be able to acquire that land, that huge ranch that covers so many counties, or not?
Oh, the governor's budget for it was cut significantly, so but it's still in negotiation.
Okay.
So the park district will be one of the partners in putting together a package. It's 16,000. It's huge. Just in Alameda alone, 16,000 acres that can be added to the park district.
Right.
This weekend we got a problem. They're predicting a 20-year wind event. The forecast. So any of you want to
get? I have seen those, but I can't remember if they're starting for tomorrow night or Sunday.
Sunday. So if anyone's planning a hike this weekend, do it tomorrow. Because Sunday is what the forecasters call a 20-year wind event, which means the kind of winds you get in this area once every 20 years. How many times have we heard that this year, 2020? This year cannot go away fast enough for me. So
I think it goes away with the climate crisis. We're going to continue to have these events and these fire. Yes.
You weren't routinely closing parks when you were on that board simply because of wind events, and we are. Because the combination this Sunday and Monday is going to be low humidity, high temperatures, dry vegetation, and lots of wind. In other words, a recipe for really bad wildfires.
Right.
So we're going to close Sunday and Monday all the parks in the Oakland Hills, Berkeley Hills, Richmond Hills. So Castro Valley to Richmond, the hill parks, including Tilden, will all be closed Sunday and Monday, and throughout the parks, Sunday and Monday are going to be a little iffy, and just don't stay under trees too long with all the wind that's going on. So it's weird time, but that's what's happening, at least with some of the major parks in the Park District, Sunday and Monday. Thanks, Manny.
You're welcome. Tiffany, did you have a question?
Hi, Manny. No, actually, I wanted to say hello and thank Senator Skinner for being here. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the implementation of Prop 16, which I expect to pass easily.
Prop 16, yes, I'm glad you brought that one up because that one is a very important. The other two measures I was going to mention are Prop 16, which we have the ability to correct something the California voters did, which was a huge mistake when they passed Prop 209. So we have the ability to correct that by yes on Prop 16, and I just wired them a big amount of money the other day because I want to make sure that the legislature put that on the ballot. I want it to be successful, and it would bring back equal opportunity for everyone in California. So Prop 16 is very important. The other one that's very, very important that some people may be confused about is Prop 25. Prop 25 would end money bail. So we have to say yes. Now this is kind of interesting because the legislature already did it. We already voted to end money bail, but then the bail industry. Now the other interesting thing to know, the bail industry is not little mom and pop shops. It is primarily big banks, insurance companies, surety companies. That's the bail industry. And they did a referendum on what the legislature did because they want to keep their industry alive. And they are trying to reverse our action. So what they want is no on 25. They want people to vote no, which would bring back bail. We have to vote yes and retain our ability to eliminate money bail, because the ability to pay should not be the determiner of whether you're sitting in jail. So thank you, Tiffany, for bringing up Prop 16 and also allowing me to talk about Prop 25.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up to 16? Or 16 was the money bail one, right? I get them all.
25 is money bail, 16 is affirmative action.
Oh, right. Okay. So 25 with the money bail. So one of the things that I read, and I don't know who's making this argument, that the system that can come in to replace money bail would end up also having consequences for people of color. And so I was curious, what is that system that is replacing it, and what are the consequences that can come as a result of it?
Certainly. Good question, because that's the confusion. So when the legislature was negotiating the bill that ended money bail, first off, you know, we can wish this were different, but the fact is money speaks in politics. And the bail industry is a formidable special interest group. And the bail industry employed like 12 different lobbying firms. They were so focused on trying to kill what was SB 10, the measure that was going to get rid of money bail, that in all the negotiations, what ended up is they kept throwing these doubts in people's mind, and they kept saying, you know, if you do that, then criminals will be on the street and people's public safety will be harmed. You don't want criminals just on the street. That's the point of bail. So they basically, the judicial system, came up with this notion of a certain type of assessment or algorithm that you'd use to determine whether somebody stayed in jail or not if you got rid of bail. Now, the problem with that is that most of these kind of assessments, they don't factor, they're racist. And it's not that they are intentionally racist, it's just that the system itself is racist. So there's been speculation that replacing money bail with this other thing could end up with people of color being in jail even longer. Now, here's the flaw in that argument. If the bail industry is successful and they succeed in 25 going down, which means you killed the legislature's bill, then the legislature's hands are tied. We can't do anything to fix anything. Whereas if we vote yes and we eliminate money bail, there's no bail industry. They're out of the picture. They can no longer influence the debate in Sacramento, and we can then change this process that was initially put in, and we can get rid of the assessment that could potentially be racist. We don't have the ability to get rid of any of those things if Prop 25, if their referendum succeeds. So if Prop 25 goes down. That's why it's so important to vote yes on 25 so that we can develop the appropriate system and get rid of money bail. Does that help?
Yeah.
Good.
That answered the question.
Great.
That was a real good explanation. I was just talking to Anthony Tave earlier today because they had a forum in their Progressive Alliance in Pinole regarding these things.
Uh-huh. And Anthony, I hope the Progressive Alliance concluded the yes on 25.
I'm pretty sure it was more of a. I think everyone is in agreement that this is an economics thing, and thereby people of color are not represented. You know, they wind up having to wait it out and not be able to afford bail. And we've seen the disparity in the justice system forever. The majority of our conversation was mostly centered around safety and policing in Pinole. It was a great conversation that Pinole Progressive Alliance had hosted, so that we could start to hear what makes people feel safe. Because, you know, Pinole police have been doing great, and by every metric, when you look at a police department, they're successful. But then the question becomes, why don't people feel safe in Pinole? Right? And we needed our elected officials to hear that what are those things. The audience was relatively small, but we're hoping to grow that conversation because we just recently had Miles Hall murdered in Walnut Creek.
Right.
And what really made me upset about that whole situation was, you know, what hurt me really was his mom made the call.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
forced me to,
Yes.
you know, as a parent, I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to get help,
Right.
right? And then nobody talks about, I told our supervisors, nobody talks about the 30 calls that happened prior to this one. It
Right.
wound up fatal. And who really should have been responding? Now, law enforcement can only do something when a law is broken.
Right. That's right.
So who intervenes when guys yelling at girls yelling at guy? The police officer in a position where it's like there's not a law broken here. So, you know, his supervisor saying you need to get to another call. And that issue just kind of grows and the police are called again. So it's just pushing the mental health question, right?
Well,
Is where are our health professionals
Right.
in this?
This
And
is a perfect segue is Prop 20.
right.
Why we have to vote no on Prop 20. Prop 20, the voters of California passed two really good initiatives, Prop 47, Prop 57. Both of those initiatives fixed some of our bad sentencing laws so that people would serve a little shorter time in prison. We spend now $85,000 per person in prison. We have over 100,000 people in prison. Imagine if we spent a third of that on kids in school, right? Or kids in college. So, or if we spend a third of that on mental health services. So these original measures that we voted on, they were written in such a way that any money that was saved by reducing the prison population would be converted over to public safety, to prevention type, like mental health and services where you could you could have your 911 set up so that the dispatcher was sending a social service worker versus a police. That's very hard to do right now because Pernod, Hercules, you don't have the budget for that. You don't have the budget it's not that you wouldn't want to, you just don't really have the funds. And so Prop 20, by reversing those, would cause the prison population to go up. And notice who's funding Prop 20? The prison guards. It's a full employment for the prison guards. They don't want any prisons closed. And it would be terrible because over time, we will be able to save money by the reduction in the prison population, which in turn can allow us to have the funds to do the services that are needed. So you're not sending a person with a gun on a mental health call. So you got to vote no on 20 also. No on 20.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that this conversation is really sparking. I mean, a lot of we are not in the health business in Panola, and I don't think so in Hercules, but the county is, right?
Yeah.
Those services are there, and there is staff there. So the question starts to become, how do we weave their crisis intervention team into a police function or city function? I mean, I really don't have the answers, but this is what's been coming out of our discussions and just talking about it. But I mean, the first step is yeah, we need to know on 20.
Next is Jamila and then Charlie Davidson.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming. As a local candidate running for school board, I have two questions. The first part is, what do you tell, we have a lot of candidates running here, what piece of advice do you have for us for the next 11 days? How do we get to the finish line? How do we make it through? That's the first question, because I think we could all use a piece of that advice. The second question is, you were talking about the policing system and that how it is a system that has in it systemic racism, racist policies. Do you agree that the education system has that same setup with those same markers that are inherently set up to create barriers for some and have access for others?
Well, Yes, absolutely. But it's not only our education system. Unfortunately, when this pandemic it's been a kind of tipping point, in my opinion, in terms of exposing, people have had to stay home. So we're in a more reflective moment. And in that more reflective moment, we have been both horribly observing police violence against Black and brown people, primarily deaths towards Black people. But we've also seen a response and a reaction and a conversation. But we've also seen the pandemic disproportionately impact Black and brown people. And it's not because a Black or brown person's any more likely genetically to get the disease than me. It's all of the systemic racist things that, and when I say this, it isn't about like whether Nancy Skinner is consciously a racist or not, or whether anyone here on this Zoom meeting is. It is rather that we have built in, either due to where our schools are, our housing policies, zoning itself, zoning, where we put, how we zoned, where we allowed certain types of patterns of housing and all that, were deeply racist. It was explicit. And if you look at a map now, there's a UC Berkeley project that just took historic maps for when redlining was allowed. Redlining was the practice where you could exclude Black, brown, and other people, Jews, from living a certain place, many, many neighborhoods. That was made illegal. But if you take those same maps and you put them on the Bay Area, it's as if redlining never went away, never went away. So what's the difference? Exclusionary zoning, bad mortgage practices, the employment practices, the inability for people of color to get to go to a decent elementary school, which then prepares them for the ability to get into a higher education, and then without affirmative action, not even being accepted at our higher education programs. So it's deep, deep, deep in so many layers, and we have to peel it back. And in part of peeling it back is recognizing that it can't just be corrected overnight, which is why we need things like affirmative action and why we need to make some other corrections. But the classic example, unfortunately, is our criminal system, where all of the data shows that a Black and brown person is no more likely to behave in criminal behaviors. This is contrary to everything you may perceive on any television or newspaper ads or stories that we see. Black and brown people are no more likely to engage in criminal behavior than me, than a white person. However, they are much more likely to be stopped by an officer, and when stopped, to then be arrested, and then when they're arrested, to be convicted. So I have all three of those benefits. I am not stopped near as frequently, and then if I am stopped, I'm neither ticketed nor arrested as likely, and then if I was arrested or ticketed, I am not likely to be convicted. So those things are deep. The data shows it. We have to correct it. We're trying now, but that's why I have been such a strong proponent of many of the ballot measures that I mentioned, and also a lot of the legislation I've carried. Now, back to what you do as a candidate. Yes, being a candidate is, hey, you're brave. Thank you for running. Thank you for being willing to be a public servant and to be a steward for our schools. You know, everyone hasn't voted yet, even though a lot of people have, not everyone has. And I think calling voters, calling and texting, and just being clear who you are, you're on the ballot, and asking people for their vote. That's the clear. Right now, it's, and if they are a yes vote, then asking them if they have voted yet, and if they haven't, what their plan is, when they're going to get that ballot either into the drop-off box or into the mail so it can be counted for that election November 3rd. But yes, calling and texting voters, it's still worth it.
Charlie?
Yeah. Hi, Nancy. How are you?
Charlie, how? Good.
Hi, I'm running for the Rodeo Hercules Fire Protection District Board of Directors.
Wow, I didn't realize.
Yeah,
Apologies.
I'm finally jumping in.
Well, good. Going for being public servant also.
Yeah, thank you for inspiring us all. I guess I have 1,000 questions, but let me start off. What is going on up in Sacramento about dealing with these catastrophic firefighters? Hercules is facing I call it the greater Briones area because we have the park there, but then all the way between Highway 24 and the Carquinez Strait and Highway 80 and Highway 60, most of that is, either rural or urban rural interface. And so I'm wondering, there's a lot of really dry fuel up there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's really hard to reach those canyons, and it's like that in a lot of places in California.
Right.
And is there any kind of talk about how to kind of deal with on a structural basis as we're moving into this extended drought era?
Right. Well, when you bring that up, I was horrified. I'm sure you all were watching with great trepidation last fall when that fire jumped the Carquinez Strait. The fire that started in Vallejo jumped and then was on both sides of 80, right? It was right near 4 and it was on both sides of 80 and closed all 80 down and was near refineries. And yeah, that was very nerve-wracking, and it could happen again. So the difficulty when you have, California is basically a desert. It is not really even when we're not in serious drought period, we have very dry conditions. We have 6 months dry, 6 months rain, even in a very wet year. So we obviously, those of us who own property, have to do our work to make sure that we have defensible space. And then entities like the Park District and the other entities that own land that also have to make sure that whether it's fire breaks or various things to make sure that there's defensible space. But those are really the main activities that we have to engage in. There's no way to clear. When you look at the grasslands of Contra Costa County, Eastern Alameda County, you can't clear those, but you do have to make sure that you have defensible space and that you have adequate fire services and fire protection. So if something happens, they can get there quickly and do their best. And what we've been doing as the legislature is we've been putting a lot more money into beefing up our ability to do this wildlands management, putting more requirements on PG&E so that they are managing all the areas near their equipment, so that their equipment is not starting fires and we don't just have to have power outages. And there have been a number of, the budget had some significant things. It was less than we hoped because with the pandemic, we saw the budget, our resources dropping, but I know it's going to continue to be a priority because just for example, these latest fires just blew another $1 billion of state expenditure that we had not budgeted for yet. So we want to use money to prevent rather than having to face another fall or another period where we have to spend $1 billion. So, and fire season is not over yet.
Tom, do you have a question, Tom? Nancy, we really appreciate your coming over. I know you've given us a lot of time, but we'll try to get maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then I know you're doing overtime here. But any other people? Tom, do you have a question, or anyone else have questions? No one has questions anymore. Okay, well, we really appreciate your coming over, Nancy.
Absolutely.
It's been a great community dialogue with you tonight.
Well, I appreciate that you hosted it and I were able to be part of it because I would have obviously have been in Pinole and Hercules San Pablo, Richmond, many, many, many more times, over since last March, you would have seen me at various things, whether it was one of the events at the library or, something. But we haven't been able to do that. So fortunately, I'm on the ballot, and voters willing, I'll have 4 more years. We'll have enough either vaccination or other protections from the virus that I'll get to circulate and see you all more in person over the next 4 years. And I look forward to it.
Yeah, we'll invite you many more times, and then hopefully a lot of the people here would have been elected, and that they will be interacting with you a lot.
Good luck. Good luck. Yes.
Thank you, Nancy. We miss you.
Mwah, mwah.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay.
Good night.
See you.
Okay.